Hi everybody and welcome to our Apprenticeship Service webinar. Today we're going to be looking at a live walkthrough of some of the key apprenticeship journeys that you need to be aware of when you're using the Apprenticeship Service to manage your apprentices. And our session is aimed primarily at training providers today, but I'm aware that we've got quite a number of employers joining us as well. So welcome to you all. My name's Nick Duff from the Service Engagement team and I'll be hosting today. Can I point out that the webinar is being recorded? Can I remind you that by registering and attending today, you're giving your consent and you're agreeing for the recording of the webinar to be uploaded onto our YouTube channel. If you feel that you've changed your mind regarding that consent, can I please ask that you dial off? So as for the recordings, I'll tell you a little bit how you can access those in a while, a little bit later on. But we are going to be covering quite a lot of ground today, so referring back to those recordings will be a great idea. And you can also share the link with your colleagues as well, so that they can listen in if they need to, or if they find it interesting. I'll also let you know how to access a handout that we have for today's session, and that will have all of the key links that the presenters are going to be referring to during the main input. Okay, hopefully you'll notice that you've all automatically been placed on mute, and you'll remain on mute throughout the webinar. Okay, we're also expecting the session today to last for about 90 minutes. When we did our practice run, we were slightly over. So hopefully what we'll try and do is try and pull back that time into the time allowed. But to give you all as much time as possible to see the journeys that we're going to demo, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the Q&A session right at the end of the webinar. So it may be shorter than we would ideally like, but if we do run over, if we look like we're running over, what I might do is just steal a few extra minutes of time at the end to cover any of the key questions that you might ask. And we normally get lots and lots of questions. And if we don't get through all of the questions that you ask, we will commit to taking them away. And so for any that we haven't answered, we'll take them away, we'll get them answered for you, and then we'll send an email out to everybody that attended today with the answers to those unanswered questions. And that will take us about, well, that'll be in about 3 or 4 weeks' time. So to ask a question, have a look at your control panel, and hopefully you'll see a heading called questions. If you click on that, you can pop your questions in there, and then we'll look at those in the Q&A session. And then as we move towards the end of the session, as you leave the webinar, you automatically get directed to a very, very short survey. We'd love to know what you thought about today, about the session. So please do take a couple of minutes just to answer a few quick questions and provide us with your feedback. In terms of the presentation, I'm joined by Rob Dickinson, Luke Brown, and Nithya Jaganesh from our Apprenticeship Operations team. They'll be going through the main input for our session today. And we also have Raj Balguri, and he'll be running the demos. And
the demo you'll be seeing comes from the dummy data in our test environment.
So in terms of the demos, what they're going to be doing is they're going to be showing us some of the key journeys, and we're going to cover things like how employers register for an account, how they add PAYE schemes and additional users to their account, how employers access levy funding and how they access funding to reserve, and also things like the recruit and apprentice function and how to add an apprentice and recognition of prior learning, and also how to set provider permissions. There'll be a few others, but they're the main areas that we'll be covering. We're also joined by Sam Miller. He'll be joining us for the Q&A session, and he's there to help us answer any questions that you have should we have time. So welcome to everybody and welcome to all of the presenters. So Rob, I think we've got you up first, so I'm handing over to you. Are you okay to take over?
Yeah, thank you, Nick. Welcome to the webinar, everyone. As Nick says, this webinar is targeted at training providers to help assist employers access and use the apprenticeship service, and will also showcase selected journeys from within a provider account. To start with, we just want to show you some slides summarising the employer account registration journey. Can I have the next slide, please? Okay, so firstly, in order for an employer user to access the apprenticeship service, they need to have a gov.uk one login account. The gov.uk one login registration process asks the user to input their nominated email address, set a password, and ask them to choose one of two possible two-factor authentication methods. Login is authenticated via a two-factor authentication security code, which is sent via text message or generated from within an authenticator app. More information about creating a GovUK1 login is available to employers in our online help articles, and we will provide links to these in the webinar handout. Next slide, please. After completing the GovUK1 login registration, the user will be navigated to the Digital Apprenticeship Service's 5-step employer account registration journey. Step 1 is add your user details, where the user will be required to enter their first and last name. The terms and conditions are available on the link at the bottom of this web page, and when the user clicks continue, we'll accept these terms and conditions. Next slide, please. Super. After entering and confirming their details, employers will be presented with our 5-step Create Your Employer Account task list. Step 1 is marked as complete, and the web page shows the remaining 4 steps required to create an employer account within the Apprenticeship Service. The 5 registration steps are: 1. Add your user details. 2. Add your organisation and PAYE scheme. 3. Set your account name. 4. Accept your employer agreement. And 5. Add a training provider. We will not go through the entire registration process now. A video showing the full 5-step registration process will be made available on our YouTube channel shortly. We will, however, show you the 2 different methods an employer can add a PAYE scheme and how they sign the employer agreement, as they cannot get funding for apprenticeship training without it. Next slide, please. Adding a PAYE scheme to an employer account is step 2 of the 5-step registration journey. When starting step 2, the employer will be asked how much their annual payable is. They have 3 options here: over 3 million, close to 3 million, or less than 3 million. Selecting either options 1 or 2 prompts the employer to add their PAYE scheme using their Government Gateway login. This is typically for employers that pay Levy. It is important to note that if the employer adds their PAYE scheme through this route, they will be able to add multiple PAYE schemes to their employer account, something we're going to demo later in the webinar. Option 3, less than £3 million, prompts the employer to add their PAYE scheme using their Accounts Office reference number. This is typically for employers that do not pay Levy. The Accounts Office reference number is shown at the top of all paperwork an employer receives from HMRC. If an employer adds their PAYE scheme via this route, they will not be able to add multiple PAYE schemes to their employer account. Next, we're going to look at accepting the employer agreement. Can I have the next slide, please? Accepting the employer agreement is step 4 of the 5-step registration process. When completing step 4, an employer will see the employer agreement in full, something we are not going to show here, but please do read. The employer will be asked if they want to accept the employer agreement on behalf of the employer account they have just created, with the option of yes or not yet. Selecting yes, I accept the agreement, and clicking continue presents the user with a green confirmation box informing them that they have accepted the employer agreement. This means the employer can now get funding for apprenticeship training. Next slide, please. Providers have the ability to invite employers to join the Apprenticeship Service under the Manage Employer Invitation section of your Apprenticeship Service account. The details you need to include to send to an employer are organisation name, employer email address. The invitation will lead the employer into the same 5-step registration journey. Can I have the next slide, please? Super. For more information about the provider-led registration journey, please view our online help articles. Links to these will be provided in the webinar handout. Right, that's the slides done. We're going to move over with the live demo of the service now, so please bear with us whilst we switch over.
While you're doing that, I'll just come in and say, people have asked about recordings. Yes, we are recording today, as I mentioned in the handover, in the introduction, sorry, and I'll tell you how to access those a little bit later on. And there was a question about have we got a YouTube video around Gov1 login? So for that one, yes, we have, but it's not published yet. That's coming in the very, very near future. Okay, ready with the demo?
Yep, super. So once the employer has completed the 5-step registration journey, they should have an active Apprenticeship Service account, which looks like what we can see on screen now. To start with, we're going to show you how employers add additional users onto an employer account. We recommend that employers have at least 2 active users per account. As a provider, you must not be added in this section. We are showing you this for reference only to help you assist employers. We will cover how to add provider permissions with an employer account later in the webinar. To add an invite user, the employer needs to go to the Your Team link at the top of the web page. This will load up a web page of users that currently have access to the Employer Apprenticeship Service account. To invite a new member, click the green Invite a New Member button, add the user's details, and then select the team access you want to grant. The different levels of team member access are minimal access for employer services. This is used for employees solely using the Apprentice Ambassador Network. View information but can't make changes. This is known as the view only role. Add apprentices and view information. This is also known as the transactor role. Accept agreements, view information, and manage PAYE schemes, organizations, apprentices, and team members. This is the full account owner access role. Employees can select the permission level the new user requires. In this example, we'll just set the full owner access role at the bottom and click send invitation. This will invite the user to register for the apprenticeship service and add their account to this specific employer. The employer will be able to see confirmation of the invite sent, and they can choose either to add another team member, view all team members, or return to homepage. We are going to select view all team members and click continue. Back on this screen, the employer will be able to see a list of the users with their particular access and status, including the new user we have just added. So for the user we've just added, if you click on view next to their user account, a new web page will open where you can resend the invitation or cancel the invitation, and all invitations are valid for up to 7 days. When a user accepts an invitation, they will see an acceptance web page. They need to click accept invitation to be added to the employer account. Back on the users list, please note, once accepted, the status for the user will change from invitation awaiting response to active. So there we go, you see that there in the status column there. Next, we are going to show you where employers go to change permission and remove users. When the employer identifies the user they want to change permissions for or remove, they'll click view next to their name. On the next page, there are two options, change and remove team member. Clicking the change link will give the employer the ability to reselect one of the 4 preset permissions demonstrated earlier. If the employer wanted to remove a team member's access completely, they would select remove team member. We'll go ahead and remove this team member by clicking remove team member. The employer will be presented with a page asking them to confirm the action, and we'll click yes, remove now. This will disable the user's access to the employer account. On the Your Team page, there is a confirmation banner at the top showing the user has been removed and the user is no longer listed. That's the journey for how employers add, amend, and remove users to and from their employer account. We're now going to show you how employers can add additional PAYE schemes and organizations onto their employer account. Please note, adding PAYE schemes is typically only available to levy paying employers. To add additional PAYE scheme, go to the More link at the top of the web page and select PAYE schemes. Click on Add a New Scheme. And on this web page, the employer will be prompted to add their government gateway login, or if you click continue, we'll move on. There we go. Now they're being prompted to input their government gateway sign in. So if we input those credentials, click sign in. The employer will be presented with a web page asking them to confirm the PAYE scheme is correct, and we will click yes, continue. On the next web page, the employer is informed their PAYE scheme has been added to their account, and they are given 3 options: add another PAYE scheme, check finances, or return to home page. We'll select return to home page and click continue. Back on the home page, if we go to the More link at the top of the web page again and select PAYE schemes, we can see the additional PAYE scheme we have just added. That's how an employer can add an additional PAYE scheme. Let's return to the home page and we'll show how an employer can add an additional organization. Okay, an employer can be a single legal entity or organization or part of a group of multiple connected organizations as defined by HMRC. If, as an employer, they qualify as the latter, they may wish to have separate apprenticeship service accounts for each organization or add multiple organizations to one account. If they wish to add a connected organisation, this is the journey they would follow. Again, please note, this is not the section to add trainer provider permissions to an employer account, and we are coming to that shortly, I promise. On the homepage, the employer needs to click on the Your Organisation and Agreements. On this page, the employer can see a list of all the organisations and agreements currently registered to their account. We'll click the green Add an Organisation button. We'll then type in the name of the organisation and click Search. The service will then display a list of possible matches. The employer should select the correct organisation from the list. We'll go ahead and select one of these now. The employer will be asked to check the details. If the details do not match, they need to navigate back to the list, and they would do that by clicking No Search again. If the employer is satisfied the details are correct, they'll click Yes, Continue. For the purposes of this journey, we're going to click Yes, Continue. On the next page, the employer is informed the organisation has been added to the account, and they are given 4 options. Sign the agreement to allow the organisation to spend funds. Check which team members can sign the agreement. Add another organisation, or return to the homepage. For this journey, we will select the top option, sign an agreement to allow the organisation to spend funds, and click Continue. The employer should note the disclaimer on this page, then click Continue to the agreement. On the next page, the grey box here summarises the main points from the section of the agreement, but the employer can read it in its entirety by scrolling down or navigating using the quick links that will take them to each clause of the agreement. Employers should read this carefully before signing, as this is a legally binding agreement between their organisation and the DfE. We'll now go down to the bottom of the page and click Yes, I accept the agreement. Click Continue. And this will take us to a success page, which shows that we've successfully accepted the agreement in a big green box. We will click View Your Account to go back to the home page. Next, we're going to show you how an employer can change an organisation's name. From the home page, again, select the Your Organisation and Agreements to see the list of organisations added to the employer account. Select View All Agreements next to an existing organisation. This will show us the history of all the agreements between the DfE and employer's particular organisation. The agreement will change periodically to reflect any changes to the funding rules, legislation, etc., and each version of the agreement will appear on this page. We'll now click on the Show All Sections button to expand the agreement, and then we'll scroll down and click on Update These Details. Clicking this will pull in the latest details from Companies House and display them here. If an employer has changed their organisation name recently, they'll need to ensure this has been updated with Companies House and allow 7 working days before attempting this journey. On this page, we can review the latest details from Companies House, and once satisfied they are correct, we would select Yes, Update My Details using this information, and click Continue. So we'll do that now. We then have the success page confirming that the details are correct, and we will now select Go to Home Page and click Continue. Please note that once an organisation has an approved apprentice record associated with it, it cannot be removed from an employer account. So please ensure that when you're working with employers to add apprentice records, that you see the correct organisation details for the employer. Right, now we're going to move on to show you how employers can grant provider permissions to carry out certain tasks on their behalf within the apprenticeship service. So, to add provider permissions, the employer would go to their homepage and then scroll down to the apprenticeship section and select Your Training Providers. This will show the employer any connected providers they have previously added. For now, we are going to click Add a Training Provider. This will open a new web page where they can search using the UK PRN. They'll need to select the correct provider from the drop-down of results and click Continue. They will then be asked to confirm the provider, so we're going to select Yes, Add the Provider, and click Continue. Once they have done this, they will see the success page confirming the provider has been successfully added to their account. We'll now click Return to your training providers. The employer will now be able to see the provider they have added. So let's go ahead and set some permissions by clicking the Set Permissions link. On this web page, the employer will have two types of permissions they can grant to the employer. The first is around adding apprentice records on their behalf. This means the provider will have full control of reserving fundings and adding apprentice detail. The employer will get prompted with a final approval request before the apprentice is fully set up. This won't give providers full access to the employer account, and providers won't be able to see the employer's personal details. The second option for permissions is to allow providers to advertise apprenticeships on the employer's behalf. We call this Recruit Apprenticeships and Trainees. The options here are allow, but I want to review adverts before they are advertised, and do not allow. Employers can always change the provider permissions as well as adding multiple providers to have permissions. For now, we're going to tick allow to both sets of permissions and click continue. Again, the employer will be asked to confirm the permissions, so we'll click confirm. This will return the employer to their provider list where they will see a success box informing them of the successful action, and the newly added permissions are now visible. If an employer wishes to change the provider's permissions at a later date, they would navigate to this page and click Change Permissions and reselect the permission level. Please note, once employers have added a provider to be a connected provider, they are not able to be removed, although they can remove all the permissions so providers cannot carry out any actions on their behalf. Okay, we're just going to quickly go back to the home page. So right now, we've added and removed additional users to an employer account. We've added an additional PAYE scheme, and we've added an additional organization, and we've also granted training providers permissions to the employer account. I'm now going to hand over to Nithya, who will take you through the recruit and apprentice journey. Nithya, over to you.
Thank you, Rob. So in this section, we will go through the process of how to recruit an apprentice. For this demo, we will switch over to a provider account. So please bear with us while we switch over to a provider account. This task can be carried out by employers or by training providers. Before your advert goes live, it will be checked by quality assurance team to make sure it contains all the information and it meets our standards. It is important to note that only one of you should create an advert. If both you and your employer create an advert, it will be rejected by the quality assurance team. As a provider, you will be able to create a vacancy on the apprenticeship service, but you will need an employer to have given you permission. So to create a vacancy, go to the home page and click Recruit Apprentices on the home page. So when you select Recruit Apprentices, you will be taken through to your dashboard view of your apprenticeship vacancies. If it's the first time you're creating the vacancy, then you will not see this dashboard. You will now be selecting the big green button at the top of the page to create a vacancy. This brings you to the page that has been designed to help you create adverts. So before you can start creating an advert, you will need to know the information that's listed here, like the name of the employer, course, etc. You can also use our recruitment APIs to create adverts, or you can ask a third party to create adverts on your behalf using our APIs. And you can use the links here to find out more information. So let's get started and click on Start Now. You will now need to select which employer do you want to create a vacancy for. These are the list of employers who have given you permissions to create a vacancy on their behalf. So let's choose one employer for this demo. You'll now be shown a confirmation page where you can confirm or change the employer that you have selected. Let's confirm this employer and press Save and Continue. You will be taken to the new task list, which is visible here, and this shows you all the fields that you're going to complete. You will see that there are 5 sections of the task list that need to be completed, and there is a 6th section at the bottom that allows you to check all the answers that you have submitted before your advert will go live on Find an Apprenticeship. You won't be able to select any of the numbered sections until you have completed the first section of the task list. So as we have already chosen the name of the employer on the previous step, we'll click on the vacancy title. You will now need to add the title of your apprenticeship vacancy. You must include the word apprentice or apprenticeship in the title of the vacancy you're wanting to advertise so that candidates are aware that they are applying for an apprenticeship. So let's add a title for this vacancy and press save and continue. You are now taken through to what training course your apprentice will take. As you begin to type in the box, it will show you the list of courses that are available. So let's choose a course and press save and continue. You will now be shown a confirmation page where you can confirm or change the course that you have selected. So let's confirm this course now and continue. We are now through to building up information about your apprenticeship. So here we'll be looking for a summary of the apprenticeship. To attract applicants, you will need to write a few sentences about the apprenticeship so that it will stand out for apprentices. For this demonstration, we are adding some pseudo text and click save and continue. You are now through to input some additional fields. On this page, you can include everyday tasks for the apprentices, location of the training, whether the training will be a 1 day a week or a block release, and qualifications they will get at the end. You must include 3 bullet points for each of these fields, otherwise it won't get through our quality assurance process. So let's add some details here and press save and continue. You will notice that we have returned to the task list and you will see that the first part of the advert has been completed. And we can now move on to the employment details. Let's click on closing and starting dates. You will now need to enter the application closing dates and the apprenticeship start dates on this page. Please note that the application closing date must be at least 14 days in future and the start date cannot be before the closing date. So let's add these details and press save and continue. You will now need to complete the duration and the working hours. The first section is how many months that the typical duration of the apprenticeship will last, including work and training. Please note that the apprenticeship must last for at least 12 months. The second section is details of working weeks such as Monday to Friday or in shifts. The third section is how many hours a week will your apprentice have to attend at work, including their training. So let's add these details and press continue. We are now taken through to how much will the apprentice be paid. We can choose one of the 4 choices listed here, which is set wage yourself, national minimum wage for apprentices, and set as competitive. Please note that if you choose to set the wage yourself, then it must be above the national minimum wage. And if you choose to set as competitive, then it may limit the number of applications. For this example, we are going to select national minimum wage and press save and continue. We are now taken through to extra information about pay like bonuses and benefits. So this is an optional field and let's leave it blank for now and press continue. We're now taken through to how many positions are there for this apprenticeship. So here we are going to select 1 and click continue. Now we are showing where the apprentice will work. You can either choose employer's own address, which is pulled from their account, or you can choose to enter a different location where you can add a new address. For this demo, we'll choose the existing address and press continue. We have now completed the second part of the task list and we are through to skills and qualifications. So let's click on skills. On this page, you're able to select the skills that your apprentice will require and will select a few skills here. There is also a free text to add new skills that's not on the list. So let's add a new skill at the text box and see if it appears on the list above. So it appears on the list above. So let's go ahead and press save and continue. We now need to input the qualification that you would like your apprentice to have. You can choose one of the qualifications from the list. For example, for this example, we are going to select GCSE from the list. And the subject is English and choose a grade. And we can choose whether it's essential or desirable. For this example, we are going to choose essential and press continue. So you'll now be shown the qualification that you have input and you can either add another qualification or save and continue. For this, we are not going to add anything. So yeah, let's press save. We are now through to what is expected career progression after this apprenticeship. You may want to mention some specific routes that the apprentice will take once qualified. Let's add a few examples and press save and continue. We are now through to what else would you like your applicant to consider, and here you can put some additional information in about your apprenticeship if you require. This is an optional field, and so we are going to skip this for now and press save and continue. We are now through to section 4 of the task list and we need to complete details about the employer. So let's click on the first section, which is name of employer on vacancy. Here you can select your employer account name or you can use the free text box to add different name, or you can hide the employer name by choosing anonymous. If you choose the employer to be anonymous at this point, it could mean fewer people apply for your apprenticeship. So for this example, let's choose the existing name on the top and click save and continue. On this page, we have got some additional information that can be input about the employer. So you can add additional information about the employer. You can also select a website of the employer if they have one and tick the box if the employer has signed up for disability confidence scheme. So let's add these details and continue. So on this page, we can add in some contact details of someone the applicant can contact if they have got any questions about the vacancy of this page. If you choose yes, you should be able to see add the contact details. So here we are going to choose no and press save and continue. We are now through to how you would like to receive applications. On this page, you can select through the Find an Apprenticeship website or through a different website. For this example, we'll choose Find an Apprenticeship website and press save and continue. We are now through to the task list and we are on section 5. Let's choose section 5, which is the question for applicants. So on this page, you can add some additional questions for the applicants. For example, why do you want to work for this company? What interests you about this role, etc. So this is an optional field and we are skipping this for now and press save and continue. We are now through to the last section where you can check your answers and submit your advert. So let's click on section 6. On this page, everything that we have input will be played back. You can look at all the information that's been added in the advert and you can change or continue through to select the preview at the bottom of the page to see how your advert will be displayed on Find an Apprenticeship. So we'll click on preview vacancy before submitting. Yeah. At this point, you need to check that you're happy with the way that the advert will be viewed on Find an Apprenticeship. So you need to double check all the information that you have input, and you have the option at the bottom of the preview page to change your advert or submit. There is also an option to delete the advert. If you choose to delete at this point, it will be deleted from drafts and you won't be able to recover this advert. Once we have submitted your advert, it will go through to our quality assurance team, and then you will be able to manage your adverts later. So for now, we are happy with this advert, so we are going to submit the advert. You'll now be shown the confirmation that your advert has been submitted for approval with the vacancy reference number. And now you can return to your dashboard view to view and manage your adverts. Let's click on the return to dashboard link. This is where you will manage your adverts. You will be able to see adverts that are in draft, pending review, live, rejected, and closed by clicking the respective links. You can also view the application that you have received for vacancies and manage the applications here. If the advert that you have submitted to our quality assurance team is rejected, you can select rejected adverts and edit the advert as required and resubmit back to the quality assurance team. You will also be able to view all your adverts through the link at the bottom of the page. So now we have been through the process of how to recruit an apprentice on the apprenticeship service. Now let's go through how to share applications with your employer. Changes have been made to the training provider and employer accounts in RAA so that training providers can share applications with employers. Also, we have made it easier for training providers to make multiple applications unsuccessful. So in order to share applications, let's click on the new application link from the dashboard. Here you can see all the vacancies with new applications, and if we click manage on one of the vacancies, at the bottom of the page there are two new options now to manage applications, which is sharing multiple applications with employer or make multiple applications unsuccessful. Let's click on share multiple applications with employer. You can choose one or more applications that you want to share with employer and press continue. You are now through to confirmation page about what happens next, what the employer will need to do, and where they can find this application, and also how the employer can choose to interview themselves. You will now need to confirm this again that you want to share applications with the employer. So let's choose yes on this case and press confirm. So the application has now been shared with the employer. The employer can view this under the shared application link on their dashboard. So we have been through the process of how to recruit an apprentice on behalf of the employer and on the apprenticeship service. Now let's go through the aggregated employer demand in the slides. Please bear with us while we switch over to slides. For employers that do not currently have a training provider organized for their apprentice, they are able to search for training providers within Find Apprenticeship Training. If there is a standard that no provider trains or it's outside of the region, employers will see the boxes where they can share interest in this standard. They can provide details of their location, number of apprentices, and email address to receive responses to. Next slide, please. A list of shared interest is available to all training providers, and you can send contact and website details for possible training. You can view the list of interests that employers have shared from within your apprenticeship service account under Find Employers that need a training provider. And you can send contact details to employers for them to consider. Please note that you cannot see the names of the employers that have shared interest, and you will only see a location and the number of apprentices they are considering. So I'm going to pause there, and I'm going to pass back to Rob to show how to add an apprentice with an account. Over to you, Rob.
While you're just doing that, can I just remind everybody about submitting questions? So if you've got any questions, go onto the control panel, look for the heading that says questions, and just pop your question in there, please. Thank you.
Cheers. Thank you, Nithya. Nick, lovely stuff. Right, so we're now back in the live demo. So for this part of the webinar, we're going to show you how to make a reservation, add an apprentice, and how to view and manage your apprenticeships. If you are working with a levy paying employer, you do not need to reserve funding, as levy paying employers fund apprenticeships through their accumulated levy balance. For non-levy paying employers, there are two ways you can reserve funding for them. The first option is that you can go through the Add New Apprentices link on the homepage and start the Add an Apprentice journey. Or you can go to the Get Funding for Non-Levy Employers on the homepage and just make a reservation for an employer with no apprentices added. We will come back to the Get Funding for Non-Levy Employer section later in the webinar. For now, we're just going to demonstrate the first journey through the Add New Apprentices link. This means that we can reserve funding and add an apprentice together at the same time. So if we click on Add New Apprentices, you will be initially asked whether to add the apprentices using bulk upload file or manually. For this webinar, we're going to choose Add Manually. You'll then be asked to add to an existing cohort or to create a new cohort. For this webinar, we're going to choose Create a New Cohort. You will then be shown the list of all employers and organisations for each employer you have permission for. For now, we will choose an appropriate non-levy employer. You will be asked to confirm your employer. And if you select no, you'll be required to select a different employer. For this journey, we're going to select yes, use employer, and click continue. Please note that if you, we've now started the reservation journey, but please note if you're adding an apprentice for a levy employer, you'll now leave this journey as these pages are for reserving funding only. When adding apprentices for a levy employer, you will not see these pages, and we'll rejoin the journey later for them. But okay, so once you've added an apprenticeship, you'll see one of two pages. The first possible page is where you'll be asked a series of questions about what apprenticeship training the apprentice will take. This is the page that is on screen now. And you'll see this web page if the employer does not have any active reservations already added and ready to use. Please note that if you have not been given permission to add apprentices, then you will not be able to add a reservation, and this will need to be added by the employer, who can then begin to set up a cohort and send it to you instead. The other web page that you may be prompted with is when you can select to use a reservation that's already been created but has not yet used, or gives you the option to then create a new reservation. As mentioned, we're showing the first potential page here of the web page where we have not created any reservation yet. So we are now going to go through the questions asked to reserve funds and add an apprentice. The first is which apprenticeship training the apprentice will take, and when the apprenticeship training will start. As the apprenticeship will be funded through a reservation, you will be prompted with a 4-month window starting from the previous month. Once you have selected a month to reserve funding or selected an estimated start date on this page, the funding is reserved for up to 3 months, and you will have this long to complete setting up the apprentice on the service. So, for example, if we had to select March 2024 on this page, the funding would be reserved for a new apprenticeship start date between March 2024 and the following 2 months, so April 24 and May 24. If the apprenticeship does not start within this 3-month window, then the reservation will expire and you will have to make a new reservation. So on this screen, we're going to select the estimated month the apprentice will start and which month we want to reserve funds for, and then we'll click Save and Continue. You'll be then prompted with an overview to confirm. You can see the employer name, the apprenticeship start date with the 3-month window previously mentioned, and the planned training course. Check the information is correct and then click Confirm. Okay, this will give you a confirmation page, again with the big green box informing you of the successful action. There are now 3 options of what to do next, which are recruit an apprentice. This is a separate journey, which we showed earlier in the webinar. And we also have additional support videos available to help with recruiting an apprentice. Add an apprentice details to continue the Add an Apprentice journey, or go to homepage. You can come back to this reservation at a later date, but as mentioned, the reservation will expire if it is not used within 3 months. This reservation is also not restricted to you as a training provider, even though you are the provider that has added the reservation. If the employer works with multiple providers, then this reservation can be used by another provider if apprentice details have not been added at this time. We're going to click Add Apprentice Details and click Continue. Okay, and we're going to see a page that asks us to select the apprenticeship standard. Now, note, if you went through the Add Apprentice journey for a Levy employer, it is here where you would rejoin the journey, and you will not have seen the previous reservation pages, and you will have been navigated directly to this page when selecting I will add apprentices. The only difference in this page between Levy and non-Levy employers is that the standard is not pre-populated for Levy employers and will need to be selected. We can see on this page that for our non-Levy employer, the standard has been pre-populated with the standard from the reservation we just added. Please note that you can still change the standard for the apprenticeship if this has changed since reserving funding at an earlier date. Once you have chosen the right standard, click Continue. Okay, so please note that all the fields on this page need to be agreed between the employer and provider before the apprenticeship is live. For now, we're just going to add in some pseudo details whilst I talk through the screen. The apprentice email that you input will receive a notification once the employer and the training provider have approved the apprenticeship. This gives the apprentice the opportunity to join the service and view their apprenticeship details. The training course and start date will be pre-populated from the reservation, but this can be changed at this point. For now, we're going to complete all the information and click Add. When you are adding or approving a record, you will then be taken to a page around Recognise Prior Learning. This is only completed by yourselves. This should have already been discussed and agreed with the employer on whether there is a reduction of cost or duration on the apprenticeship based on your initial assessment with the apprentice. On the previous apprenticeship details page, when added the planned end date and cost, prior learning should have already been taken into account. If prior learning has been found, you will have to record the reduction in cost and duration of the apprenticeship. Otherwise, you can select No. We're going to choose Yes and then save and continue. We'll then be taken to a page where you can provide details as to the changes to the apprenticeship due to prior learning. First, you will add the original training duration without a reduction in hours. Below this, you will add the amount that you have reduced the duration by in hours. Note that this is the remaining amount after the reduction. Sorry, note this is not the remaining amount after the reduction. This is just the reduction. You can then select if the duration is being reduced due to RPL. If choosing yes, you will get a field to add a number of weeks reduced by based on your calculations. You'll then be able to add the cost reduction in the same way as the duration, with this in whole pounds. Please note that all the fields are mandatory. If you are only reducing one of these values in these instances, you would need to select No on the previous page when asked about prior learning. You may receive an error message at the top of the screen after clicking the Save and Continue button if there are any issues with the values you have added. This can be if your reduction will take the apprenticeship under the minimum duration period. You will be advised as the possible values you can add within the error message. If the values you have added do not coincide with the funding rule calculations, you will see an advisory screen stating what we expect the reductions to be based on the funding rules, and you need to check your calculations. If you have used the service to change the employer or training provider from an old record, then all the fields will be automatically populated with the reduction from the original record. Once you click Save and Continue with the correct values, you'll be taken to the approval page for the cohort where you can continue to either add another apprentice or approve the cohort and send this to the employer for approval. So we're just going to hit Save and Continue. Back to the journey now. Okay, so we'll now see the overview page of the apprenticeship the first option is add another apprentice to this apprenticeship reference, which is sometimes known as a cohort. Choosing this will take you through the same action we have just taken, but the employer will be kept the same. You would need to reserve funding again for each apprentice added. The second option is yes, approve and notify employer. This means that you are happy to confirm all the details and for the apprenticeship to start. If you select this option, you will not need to reapprove the apprenticeship unless the employer details change. Third option is no, send to employer to review or add details. This will return you to your list of requests. And the fourth option, just underneath the save and submit button there, is save and exit. If you want to return to the cohort later. You can also edit or delete the single apprentice or delete the entire cohort on this page if any of the details are incorrect or you find that the apprenticeship is not continuing. This does not remove the reservation from the account. We're going to select the second option here. Yes, approve and notify employer, and you will be presented with a free text box. If you want to add any notes to the employer, for now, we'll leave this blank and we'll just go ahead and click save and submit. Once you have done this, you will get a confirmation page with, again, the big green box to say that you have added the apprentice details and sent it to your employer. You will not need to carry out any further action to this apprenticeship unless your employer makes any changes or if you have not fully approved the apprenticeship yet. And that was the third option on the previous screen. I mentioned earlier that there are two ways to reserve funding. So now we're just going to briefly show you the other journey. So if we go back to the home page, and choose Get Funding for Non-Levy Employers. And click Reserve Funding. You will see all the employers that you are linked to with the option to select the appropriate employer to reserve funds for. Now, if we just go back to the home page again, and then if we click Manage Your Funding Reserved for Non-Levy Employers, here we see a full list of the reservations with employers and their states. This includes reservations that may have not been added by the employer for another provider or added by another provider and not used. Reservations are not restricted to a provider until apprentice details are added. Any reservation can be used by any provider once it is live. We won't go through these pages and add another reservation. We just wanted to show you that there are two ways to reserve funds and that this page is available to see how many reservations employers have created and used. Again, if the employer begins to pay levy, you do not need to reserve funding as levy paying employers fund apprentices from their accumulated levy balance. I'm now going to hand over to Luke, who will walk you through how to manage apprentices.
Thanks, Rob. Right, so now, as Rob said, we're just going to go through the different states that you can look at once you've actually added an apprenticeship, at least partially onto the service. So now if we just go back to the home page, and then if we click into apprentice requests, we'll see a breakdown of all apprenticeship records that are pending in some way. So these will be dependent on whether or not there are any actions that you need to take under the ready for review or draft section that are currently sitting with you, or whether or not there are actions being taken by another party, whether it be the main employer you're working with, or if it's sitting with a transfer sending employer, if a transfer funds is being used for a particular apprenticeship. So the only ones that you would be able to take actions on are ready to review or under drafts. So just wanted to give a quick overview on the four different sections that we have here. Under any of these, you can still click under the detail section to be able to look at all the details that are within those apprenticeship records prior to them being approved. So from there, we're going to go at some actually approved records that we have. So if you could go back to the home page, please. And if we go under, it should be manage your apprentices. There are two sections of this, either from the top or if we scroll further down on the page, but either option will work. And if we could just go into any of the apprenticeship records that we currently have on this account, you are able to filter by a number of different options on this screen. However, you are able to go through and look at every single apprenticeship record that you've had that's approved in some way on your account here. But if we could just go into one of these apprenticeship records, please. And from within here, we can see the details that you will have approved with your employer and got onto the service. There will be some occurrences where you can change some of these details if you're able to, such as maybe the email address or the name and things like that. But one of the most common actions you may want to take from this screen is the change of employer function from within this record, which we're able to do by seeing the change button next to the employer name under overview. So if we just click into there, please. And this will take you to a new page, which gives you a warning of what you're going to need the new employer to have done for you in the first place, which is mainly give you the correct permissions to be able to action this. And just to confirm that no reservations are used during this process if you're working with a new non-Levy employer. So for now, we're just going to click into change the employer. And then you'll be asked to choose the new employer based upon the permissions list that you already have in place. And then if we just choose one of these employers, you will just receive another screen just to confirm that this is definitely the correct employer that you wish to work with. So if we just click yes, confirm, and then save and continue. You'll then be asked to put in the new start and end training dates for this apprenticeship. So these, as you should already have hopefully agreed with the new employer, so we can just put these in for now. Now, the important thing is that if there is a stop already on the employer record, this new start would need to be at least after that, and there needs to be at least 1 month between the start and the end date that we just added in there. So if we click on the continue button that we had, we now come to the new agreed price that you have with the employer that you're moving to. So if you just place a value in here, and then click save and continue, you'll then should see an overview of all the changes that are going to be making on there. Please note that you could also potentially see an advisory screen, depending on maybe if there's a value on here that may initially not be considered normal. It may be that you maybe have a slightly higher price with the new employer, but this is not to say that it's incorrect, but you may have this warning screen just to confirm whether or not this is correct. So if we just scroll down, we can actually just check that these are the correct details, or you can go back if you need to. But in this instance, we'll just click yes, these are correct, and click save and send. So if you are working on an apprenticeship record that is still live with the previous employer, you will also get to a page where it would advise that there is an apprentice record that already exists. And now you have the option to be able to send a request to that previous employer within the service. And so that can take up to 2 weeks for that to be actioned, but that will actually cause communications to go to that employer to request that that stop gets applied for their previous record. You can also choose to say that you'll actually contact the employer directly. So there is that option there if you do have that, if you are still in communications with them to be able to do that. But we do now have that option in the service to be able to request it from the service, and it will be actioned, as I say, within about 2 weeks. And in that option, you will say what the correct stop date should be applied is. So just wanted to show that's another option that you may have. If you had a stopped record already and you're going through this process, you would just see a confirmation screen to say that this had gone to the new employer for approval. So once that gets sent to them, the employer would go under their version of apprentice requests, and they should see this record waiting for them under ready to review, as we saw on your version of the screen. So please also note that for employers, they are also able to use the same version of this function to change a record to a new provider such as yourselves, which is done in the same manner, where they will also have a further option to either add the new start and end date and cost themselves, or they can send this to you to fill in those details if they need to. And if that is the case, then the new record would come to you under ready to review to be able to finish adding those details if they are needed in any way. So those are the main actions that you can take from within your own apprenticeship service record. However, what we'll also do is show you some of the actions that can be taken from within an employer account and how they can actually change the status from their side. So if we could just move over to an employer account. Okay, so we're currently in the home page of the employee account we've seen previously in the webinar. And what we're going to do is just show how the employees will get to their approved records similar to how you have. So under here, we'll go under apprentices. And then they have very similar options to what you have just within this section of the account. So they have the add an apprentice, the apprentice requests, and manage your apprentices all under this section. So just for now, we're going to go under manage your apprentices. And they will see a very similar page that you have on all of the records they have and the statuses that they may be in. So, and they can do similar filters that you can do if they need to find a specific record that exists on there. So if we could just go into a live record that's on this account, please. So from here, they'll see the same information that you see around the apprenticeship details. And as you can just see on the screen, we won't go into it, but you can see the change option next to the training provider name that which you showed on your version of account, where they can now do the change of provider function similar that you can change employer. But in this instance, what we're going to show you is how they can change the status of these records, as this would need to be done for the employees if they are changing employer or provider, as we've shown earlier. So in this instance, if we could please click into edit status. And then on this screen, there will be three options for an employer that they'll be able to go into. They'll be able to pause this apprenticeship, and this is used if the apprentice is on a break in learning, or if the employer wants to temporarily pause payments to you for whatever reason. They'll be able to remove that pause from the apprentice at a later stage once it's actually put in place. Another option is to stop this apprenticeship, and this is used if the apprentice is no longer on the apprenticeship and they want to permanently stop payments to you. If they're stopping an apprenticeship, they will need to ensure the date that they apply for the stop is the month after they're responsible making payments to you. They also do not need to stop apprenticeships if they are completing. As we know, this can have an effect on payments that are made to you once they do complete. This completion status should show on the record automatically once the payment has been made to you, so they should not be stopped. So just for this initial journey, we're going to tick pause this apprenticeship and then click save and continue. And then this will open up a new page where you'll be asked to and employers will be asked to confirm that they want to actually pause the apprenticeship. So here we're going to tick yes, pause this apprenticeship, and then click save and continue. And then once this is done, the employer will get a confirmation screen with the big green box to show that an apprenticeship has been paused. Please note that the pause date of the apprenticeship is always set to the date that it's actually being performed. Employees do not have the option to set a specific pause date. It will just be applied for when they're adding it. And also to note that once a pause has been applied, then you may very well see a data lock coming into your reports of a data lock 12 to show that that pause is actually in place. So you can see it from within your reports as well as on the Apprenticeship Service record on your side. So as mentioned, employees can resume apprentices as well, which is done in the same manner as we've just done as pausing. However, if we click into the edit status button, we will instead see that the apprenticeship has turned into resume this apprenticeship, and then they will just be able to go in and resume this. So if we just quickly do this now, please. And then just a confirmation to say that you are resuming the apprenticeship, click yes, resume this, and then save and confirm. And the apprenticeship has been resumed, and then that would remove that data lock from your reports if you have them. So, and what we'll also do is show you the stop journey that the apprenticeship record may go through as well. So if we could just click into edit status again, please. And this time we're going to select stop this apprenticeship. So employers will be presented with 6 options, as you can see on the screen. This screen has been added to help employers stop apprenticeships correctly on the service. To make you aware, option 3, apprenticeship training has ended, does not stop an apprenticeship and will not allow them to add it in. This option has been added to prevent apprentices being stopped that are actually completing instead, and we will update the status of this apprenticeship record once the payment has been correctly made to you. As we know, stopping an apprenticeship can actually affect the payments that come to you. All of the other options on this screen will cause a stop date that needs to be actually input by the employer. So for this example, we will select the top option, Apprentice left my employment, and select Save and Continue. They'll then be asked to input the specific stop date. They don't choose a specific day of the month. It will automatically be allocated to the first of the month that they actually put in. But if we just apply a stop here, just as an example, and then click Save and Continue, please note that the stop date cannot be applied in the future. It can only be for the current month or previous months. So when we click on Save and Continue, we get the question that on whether or not the apprentice has been made redundant. In this instance, we are just going to click on No and then Save and Continue. You'll then just get a confirmation screen to say that you definitely want to stop the apprenticeship and the date that it's for. In this instance, we're just going to click Yes, stop this apprenticeship and Save and Confirm. And then we receive a confirmation page with the green box advising that the apprenticeship has been stopped. And just to reiterate, this cannot be opened up again now that the stop has been applied. A pause date can be removed, but a stop date cannot be removed, which is why we've given the employers the other options to advise if they are correctly stopping an apprenticeship if they are needing to. So those are the main ways that employers can go through the change of status, and we did see the option for them to be able to change the provider function as well for them. For the next part of the webinar, we're going to look through the finance section of an employer's account, which may be of assistance to you to be able to know what the employer can see. So I believe we are underneath a Levy account. If we could just go to the home page, please. And we're able to go underneath, for Levy employer accounts, they can go underneath the finance section of their account, which is either on the top ribbon, or if they scroll further down, they will see your finances available to them. Either option is fine. Please note that if you're working with a non-Levy employer that begins paying Levy, they will only see a Levy balance start to occur if during the account registration process, they selected the annual pay bill option of close to £3 million and added the PAYE scheme via their government gateway details. If the PAYE scheme was added with their accounts office reference number, this will need to be removed and the PAYE added again via the government gateway option. So, on the finance page that we see here, from the top left box, employers are able to see their current funds, which is a true figure, which represents the Levy balance that's currently in their account. The box on the top right, which is funds spent since, is also a true figure, and this shows what has been spent in the last 12 months in training costs and transfers for other employers. The box on the bottom left, which is estimated total funding for the next 12 months, is an estimation based on the amount of Levy that entered the employer's account, including their 10% top-up for the previous month, extrapolated over the next 12 months. If there is no Levy in for recent months, then we go back as far as possible to get the most recent positive figure to do this estimate. The box on the bottom right, estimated planned spending for the next 12 months, is based on the active apprenticeships, transfers and completion payments, which is expected to spend for known apprenticeships extrapolated over the next 12 months. Please note that you may also see another box here called estimated funds expiring, which is based upon the total sum of Levy that entered the account 24 months ago, minus training and transfer costs and any previously expired funds. So this may assist employers in being able to advise if they are maybe going to be losing some Levy funds and if they were to potentially go into co-investment. Please note that the bottom row of figures are estimates only and can change based upon what sort of Levy balance is going in and any spending activity that occurs with those employers. Employers are also provided with 4 options at the bottom of the screen so they can perform more in-depth analysis of employer account finances. We won't demo each of these in detail, but we'll just highlight what these options does that you can talk to the employer about. So the 4 options are view transactions, download transactions, funding projection, and transfers. So view transactions allows on screen the transactions in and out of an employer account every month. Transactions in is typically their monthly Levy that they declare. Transactions out are typically payments to providers as well as expired Levy. Download transactions allowed employers to download all of their financial data for any period into either a .csv file or an Excel file for any off-system data analysis requirements. This can be beneficial when an apprentice is moving to you from a previous provider and the remaining funds available is not known. So they're able to actually filter by their apprentice and see what payments have been made to a previous provider. So the funding projection tool can project the cost of future apprenticeships based upon existing activity within an employer's account. And transfers allow levy paying employees to transfer up to 25% of their unused levy funds to a business of their choice. So this is the end of the demonstration, and so we'll just move back to the slides to discuss a few more sections in a bit more detail. So please bear with us while we just move over to the slides. Thank you. So just to advise a bit more about transfers. So the amount of levy that can be transferred from an employer is calculated from the previous financial year and is 25% of the total amount of levy declared in that year. So for example, if an employer declared £1 million of levy in the 22-23 financial year, they will be eligible to transfer £250,000 of their levy in the 23-24 financial year. So we can give more information about transfers through our online help guides, or you can watch our dedicated transfers video from our YouTube channel as shown on here. Next slide, please. So just wanted to notify that we have previously given a webinar presentation around the requirements for training providers and endpoint assessment organisations on also recording a grade and claiming a certificate for an apprentice once the apprenticeship has finished. This included details around the minimum ILR submission requirements and tips on what you may want to check if there are issues with the certificate being claimed by an endpoint assessment organisation. So a recording of this can be found on our YouTube channel, which we show here, which will be part of the handouts that we give out. So this concludes our journey through the Apprenticeship Service account. I'll now hand back over to Nick for any further questions and any further advice he wants to give. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Luke, and also thanks Rob, Nithya, and Raj for driving through the demos. Really detailed input and really insightful input about some of those key journeys. Okay, so what I'll do is just spend a couple of minutes just going through some more support slides, and then we'll move into the questions and answer session. So just wanted to take the opportunity to tell you about our YouTube channel. We've mentioned it already. This is where you can find some playlists that we've got. We've got 3 playlists on this channel, and the recording of today's webinar will go into the webinar recording playlist, and that'll be in there in about 3 weeks time after we've just done some edits on it and made it accessible so that people can see that. Interestingly, we did a session yesterday aimed at employers, so we've got the recording for that one will also be on that playlist as well, so you can see the entire journey from the employer perspective as well, if you want to go and do that. The other 2 playlist that we've got is the using the Apprenticeship Service playlist. A couple of you mentioned this already in the questions about are there smaller journeys broken down into videos that show the journeys within the Apprenticeship Service. So yes, they are, and they're in the using the Apprenticeship Service playlist, and we'll be updating and refreshing some of those videos over the next couple of months, so go and have a look at those. And then we've also got some other videos in there created to support the delivery of apprenticeships that are available in the apprenticeship support playlist as well. So if you have a look at that, the channel is called @DFE Sector Comms on YouTube, and if you go into that, have a look at those playlists, you can subscribe to that channel and then click the bell icon, and then you get alerts when new content is uploaded. On to the next slide, please. Thank you. So on this slide, we've got a few links about some of the places you can go to access support. And as we mentioned, we've got a PDF document that you can now get from the control panel. So if you look at the control panel, go to the handouts tab, you should see a document in there with all of the links that we've referred to, both on this screen and during the presentation. So yeah, so you don't have to scribble them down whilst we're going through them. So we're pointing out places to go like apprenticeships.gov.uk if you haven't been there already. It's got loads of stuff on there for employers and providers about apprenticeships in the Apprenticeship Service, so have a look at that. For our providers, I think most of you will probably be aware that there's a peer-led discussion forum that's called Further Education and Training Providers Community, where you guys go on there and support each other with any queries about data and reports and whatever else on there. So have a look at that if you're not familiar. To register for any of our future webinars, there's a link there, which is also in the handout. By the 12th of March-ish, you should be able to access a recording of today's session on there from that link as well. You should also be able to see the employer webinar on there as well. So we make that available really early, and then that way we can spend some time making sure that the YouTube video is fully accessible before we publish that on the YouTube channel. So if you want to have a look at the recording in the next couple of weeks or so, click on that link there and go to the GoToWebinar platform to look at those recordings online. And then finally, if you've got any other specific queries about the apprenticeship service, and a lot of you did in the questions that you submitted, a lot of you had very, very specific questions about your account or some of your apprentices, contact the support service. So there's the self-service support tool, or you can email the support team as well, and their contact details are both on the slide as you see it now and on the handout. So if we just move on to the next slide, we'll have a look at some of the questions that we've got time for. We've got 12 or so minutes left, so we can go through some of those. So let me refresh my page and go back up to the top. Okay, so we started off around registration, how to register for an account, and one of the first questions that came in was around actually it didn't relate to that. It was before that. It was a question, Sam, I think that we'll just get out of the way first. A question about whether an apprentice can be self-employed or not.
Hi, cheers, thank you. According to the funding rules, unfortunately, no self-employed or sole traders are not able to sort of take on the apprenticeship, or in terms of individuals who are not eligible for funding. So a provider must not claim funding for an individual who is either self-employed or as a sole trader.
Okay, and then whilst I've got you, there was a question about the pause and stop function, which I think we expected. So it says, is there a way that employers can be prevented from using the stops and pauses within the account because it results in potential double locks and impacts on the funding that training providers get?
Yeah, so there was a question nice and early on, and then there was some more towards the end. So if you don't mind, I'll try and group kind of quite a few of them all together as a provider stop. So in terms of stops and pauses, no, at the moment, currently there isn't a way of a provider sort of either not allowing or stopping an employer from carrying out those actions. Those have been put into the service for an employer as they sort of manage and control their apprenticeship as well as the employee that kind of works for them. We are, as you may have seen, and people may have been on previous webinars, we've improved the journey in terms of that sort of Luke and others went through today, in terms of where people are selecting the wrong reasons to why to add a stop, where we kind of redirect them elsewhere. And we are looking at, in terms of for future work, around where providers could maybe recommend a stop. So for example, where we're seeing overlapping training dates, where an employer is not responding, and you know for a fact that they've stopped one employer and they're moving to another employer, we have that ability in there for as a provider to sort of trigger that notification, where the apprenticeship service will inform the existing employer to say the provider says this apprentice is no longer with you, and then we encourage the employer to go in. If the employer does not kind of go through and action that, and whether they've liquidated, got out of business, or whether they're just refusing to acknowledge email, after 2 weeks, then an automatic stop is applied onto that apprenticeship. So it's not quite providers being able to do it there and then, but we are looking at sort of how, again, we can even improve that. But we've started to make that journey where we give employers more information so they don't make the wrong mistake, and allowing providers to suggest a stop in certain scenarios.
Okay, thank you. And if I ask you a question later on that you've already covered in that answer, just remind me and we'll move on. Okay, so there's another quick question for you, if I can, and this is about, can employers invite training providers as users on their accounts?
So the short answer, no. So employers should not be adding training providers to their account as a user. However, obviously we've gone through in terms of to look at sort of the provider permissions, and we've explained that. There was another question again where quite a few times people said an employer's accidentally sort of added the provider name as sort of login details. We know obviously mistakes obviously can happen when an employer may not be familiar with using the service and may do that. So there is the ability and options to sort of change names and change details sort of once accounts are registered. So we do sort of allow people to have that invitation, that option to do it. But we are trying to, again, a lot of the support documentation, the knowledge articles and the guidance around there to try and get employers to ensure that they're registering with their details instead of provided details. But in that question, no, employers should not add providers out on their account as a user.
Yeah, I mean, I think that also impacted on the recruit thing. So Nithya, I think there was a question that talked about an employer has added a training provider as the employer for a vacancy. Was that a question you were looking to provide any clarification
on? The employers cannot, I think they need to give permissions to create vacancies on their behalf. The employers need to give permissions to providers, which is covered under the provider permissions earlier in the journey, but they don't need to provide, they don't need to add a provider as a contact unless it's absolutely essential. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Luke, there's a question for you. It says, how long are the invitations that are sent to employers from the training provider live for?
Yes, thanks. So there's no sort of end date on the invitation that I send out. The employee can just go on at any point to be able to add it based upon the invite that's sent to them. You are able to resend the invite if it's been a while and they haven't actioned it yet, just if they need a fresh email that's sent to them to actually start that process. Just note that if they don't use that process, then that status on the invitation that you have may not show that they have actually created the account if they didn't use the invitation that was sent to you. However, there is no expiry on the invite that's sent out, but you can give them little reminders if you do need to.
Okay, cool, thank you. Rob, a question about Gov1 login. So when an additional user is added to an Apprenticeship Service account, does that user have to create the Gov1 login?
They do need to create the Gov1 login. So access to the Apprenticeship Service from the employer side is all controlled by gov.uk1 login. So it doesn't matter whether the user was going to be an owner, a transactor, or just a viewer. In order to access the Apprenticeship Service, they're going to need to have their own gov.uk1 login. And a lot of that is to do with two-factor authentication and the fact that a device of their own will be used to authenticate their login. That's all required for security purposes. We want to make sure all the data is nice and secure in there. So yeah, they're going to any user added to the employer account is going to need to have their own gov.uk1 login account.
Okay, and am I right in thinking that the provider account is also accessed through Gov1 login now?
No, the provider account's accessed via DFE sign-in.
Okay, that's right, correct. DFE sign-in. Yeah, you're right. Thank you. Okay, Sam, question for you. Also about account setup. So how can an employer with an AS account set up trying to get a Gov account, but is told that their PAYE details are not correct and that there's no employer account set up for that particular PAYE scheme?
So it's probably more just an explanation in terms of how the accounts work. So the potential in terms of that query, the PAYE maybe be used by another employer, perhaps maybe it's an employer that's maybe an umbrella company that has multiple PAYE schemes, and they attach multiple with them, and somebody within that branch is just to maybe create another one. In terms of how our information works and how our data works is we consume that information in terms of what an employer is declaring and what an employer is saying to HMRC. So the PAYE details, the account office reference number, and the pensions regulator data is a live fresh feed from HMRC. So if there are sort of questions around in terms of that PAYE does not exist, it may be the fact that there are some issues with sort of the PAYE scheme at HMRC, and it might be a case of that the employer needs to go through and ensure that they're sort of doing sort of blank declarations for Levy, perhaps through to HMRC, to ensure that their PAYE scheme is actually sort of live and registered before sort of then using that on the apprenticeship service.
Okay, I'm going to skip on a few questions if I can, but still one for you, Sam. The question that we've got was about supporting a postgraduate teaching apprenticeship and requires the use of a DfE's Find an Online platform to advertise vacancies. So we were talking about obviously using the recruit function where the vacancy gets added to FAA, the Find an Apprenticeship, but obviously there's a requirement for this particular person to advertise their vacancy on somewhere else. So can you just outline how that would work about vacancies appearing on both Find an Apprenticeship and on other platforms as well?
Yeah, so the vacancies can be advertised obviously on multiple platforms, so it is okay to do that for any employer or provider that wants to do that. We do have sort of APIs that can connect multiple different platforms together. I wanted to come in on that person's point to let them know that we are looking at sort of government vacancies or vacancies, particularly apprenticeships, advertised across different government platforms. So we are doing some work in terms of making sure that they are consistent. So for example, you may have NHS vacancies, you may have vacancies on civil service jobs, you may have vacancies perhaps that are at UCAS, that's one of the ones that we've included now, and you may see these vacancies that are advertised on those platforms, and where they are apprenticeships, we're trying to make sure that they are linked together, so they also then automatically will go on to recruit an apprentice. So there is work in that space. I understand that has been fed back to us by multiple people before in the past, so we are looking to improve that.
Thank you. And then Nithya, when we were looking at the recruit thing, we were talking about the fact that providers have the ability to share with employers multiple applications. There was a comment from one provider here to say that they don't have that option in their account. They've only got the decline multiple applications. How do they get that added onto their account?
Yeah, I think if it depends on the application status. If the status of the application is new, then they should be able to see both options, like sharing applications with the employer and also declining multiple applications. But if the status of the application is review, they may not be able to see. But if there are any, I think if the status is new and still they can't see the sharing applications options, then they may need to contact the support team so that we can have a look further, and they don't need to specifically do anything to get this added. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I know we're at time, so for those of you that want to stay on for another 5 minutes, I'm going to go through another couple of questions and do those. But what I made the commitment earlier on that any question that was asked that we won't cover through the Q&A session, we will get an answer for you and we will email them out to everybody that's attended today. But for those that want to stay for the next 5 minutes, let's pick up another couple of questions. Questions about reserving funding, Luke, and it says that there was still is 1 month that you can go back to reserve funding and 3 forward. Is that the case? It's still the 1 month you can go back? Oh, sorry.
Yes.
That was for Rob. Well, either of you can answer it.
I mean, I'm happy to just jump in, just say yes, it is currently a case of it's currently 1 month back from the month that you are on the service, and then the 3 months ahead of that. Although please note that if you do put a reservation on, that is the 3 months ahead. So if we're currently in March and you added the reservation in for May, you do still have 3 months after May, or the 2 months after May technically, to be able to add it on. So you'd have May, June and July to be able to add the reservation on from May or for those months. So you do have that period that extends further forward, but as it currently stands, the earliest you can go back is just by 1 month. So we'd go back to February in this sort of example.
Okay, and then Luke, this one definitely for you. Putting a learner on, so they're putting a learner on this particular provider that's already been on an apprenticeship and they weren't able to use their email address. The system won't allow that. Therefore, they're having to ask the learner to make up another email. This is very frustrating. Is there anything we can do for that?
Yes, Nick. So we are aware that that comes as a bit of a restriction, because once an apprenticeship record is stopped, then certain values such as email address can't be changed if they move over. So just to clarify that, even if the apprentice doesn't have access to that email address, as long as they still remember the password for their account, they can still log in and then change the email address from within there once they've confirmed any new details. However, if they don't remember that password, then if you contact or if the apprentice contacts the support service that we have mentioned, we are able to help gain access to that account, to therefore be able to have all of their details about their apprenticeships on their one account, to then be able to get in and change that email address if they do need to at that point. So we do have some processes in place to be able to help with that. So contacting the support service will help with that process.
Okay, and then Sam, there's a question for you, if I can. It says, so I think, yeah, the provider's asking, are we going to get a function that helps us to delete a cohort within the with employer section of the training provider account?
Cheers, thank you. So at the moment, the ability to sort of delete cohorts or kind of sort of delete requests that maybe they're in draft statuses, unfortunately at the moment that's not sort of live, but we are looking again, and probably sound like Rock in terms of what we're looking into, but we are looking into kind of an archive feature of where perhaps maybe a provider has sent some information across a draft, whether it's a request, like you said, or whether it's sort of a draft apprenticeship records, where you could sort of archive and remove. Perhaps maybe that apprentice has already been added on another cohort, or you just no longer sort of communicate with that employer anymore. But yeah, we are aware of the feedback that sometimes cohorts, particularly draft cohorts, can stay there for a long time and that no longer need to be approved. But we're looking into that.
Thank you. And then there was a couple of questions around. I'm just skip on a bit further into the pause and stop bit. Is these the bits that you covered earlier on? So there was
I think
specifically.
so.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. I'll move on from them, and then. Right, where are we? Rob, a question around, we mentioned the fact that apprenticeship levy funding with an employer's account expires, and there's a question there about, does it expire after 2 or 3 years? Can you just give a bit more information about the expiry of funds from a levy employer's account?
Yeah, certainly. So the levy expires after 2 years, so that's 24 months. And it's expired based on when it entered the account. So as soon as that levy enters the account, that sort of sets the timer ticking on when it will expire. And if that money hasn't been spent within 24 months, the levy will be expired. If an employer goes on and see that they have large amounts of levy expiring, then there are options available to them in terms of transferring funds and so on and so forth. But yeah, 24 months until it expires.
Okay, and then one last question for you, if I may. This was about employers that are on the cusp of being levy-paying employers. So maybe they're underneath and they dip above, or they're slightly above and they dip below. Did you mention something in there about an SME that moves into levy would have to then re-enter their PAYE details?
Yep, we did. Yeah, so. If they're close to the cusp and then they start paying levy, in order to pick that up, we'll have to go in, remove the old PAYE scheme, and then add the PAYE scheme using the government gateway. As long as it's done through the government gateway, it'll pick it up. Okay. I think it's more cool. if it was on before they were non-paying and the PAYE scheme was pulled via the Aon route, they'll have to remove that off and then re-add it via government gateway.
And Aon is?
The accounts reference office number.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, listen, I think we're overrunning, and I don't want to take up any more time. So I'm afraid we won't look at any of the other questions as it stands at the moment. But let's call it quits there. So that's the end of our session. Thank you so much for sending your questions. We will respond to any that we haven't answered during the session live, sending you an email with the response to those. Thank you for the presenters going through the information and the journeys in such thorough detail. Great job for you guys. Can I just remind everybody, as you leave the webinar, please complete the survey. We really value your feedback and would like to know what you thought about today. So goodbye, everybody. Have a wonderful rest of the day. See you later. Bye.